Start the second chapter. What I thought was really interesting about this chapter, I don't think we're going to get there today, but towards the end, he starts to get religious. And I bring that up because, again, a lot of Sefer Kohelet is this long lament about the state of the world, and then at the end is thrown in, but fear God, that's the main thing. I do think this second chapter shows that there's some of this underlying, even in the beginning, there's a little bit of this underlying religious message even earlier on. But again, I don't think we're going to get there today. We're going to see sort of what he pursuits that Solomon did to try to find some sort of meaning, some sort of worth. To very briefly review some of the main takeaways of chapter one. Chapter one, he points out that everything is hevel, havolim, right? It's futile, is how it's often translated. I like fleeting. I think we sort of I think we had a very rich discussion last time about how just because it's not permanent doesn't mean that it's necessarily not worthwhile or not important, but it's not permanent. It's fleeting. You can't take it with you. And that's true of the individual's condition. And then we saw that he's decided to pursue and examine sort of different avenues of of wisdom, of folly, right? He's going to look into sort of what the world has to offer. And in chapter two, he goes into it more in depth. Any questions or comments before we start reading chapter two?
Yeah.
Great.
When we were talking last time about like the translation of he who increases pain increases
Yeah.
knowledge increases pain, and the actual word is kas.
Yep.
So that's anger, and it just seems to me like a lot of like translation whitewashing.
Okay.
And so
Which Art Scroll is known to be guilty of. And I'm not saying that to be a jerk. Like it's known Art Scroll has a specific agenda and like translates in very intentional ways.
so I can't help but wonder if this like to say vanity of vanities, if you really come out with it, isn't it just another way you're of saying ego? Like
Okay.
fleeting is a much nicer way to look at it. But
Okay.
if it's ego, and maybe ego isn't as bad as we think it is, um, but it's really a motivator. I mean, I'll admit it, it's certainly a motivator for me. So
Sure. Sure. And I'm hoping that next week there's some interesting stuff that I think evokes a Gemara or two that talks about. There's a Gemara where the Chachamim, they nullified the desire to worship idols, but if you eliminate one Yetzer Hara, that really can impact even good things. It's an interesting tension there. So I think that ties into that. I hope next week we'll go into that a little bit more. I will say about the fleeting though, why I like fleeting as a translation is because the word hevel is evocative of like a breath of air, breathing, like that's very, by nature, that's just you breathe it out and it dissipates and it's gone. So that's the root hevel. That's why I like that as a translation, but noted, right? Ego, it could be related to ego, and maybe ego isn't all bad. Probably need a little bit of ego, but maybe not too much ego. Good. Let's read a little bit and see what we get. So we're in chapter two. If you're in the art scroll, it should be on 1279. And it starts Amarti ani belibi lechona anascha besimcha ure'e betov. Right, I said to myself, I said to my heart, let's examine joy and see delight or pleasure. Vihine gamu havel. And behold, it's also, right, joy and pleasure is also fleeting or futile or vexation. Lischok omarti meholal. Right, I said that rejoicing is madness. Ulasimcha mazu osa. Right, and happiness, what does happiness accomplish? All right, so we're off to a good start. Tarti bilibi limshoch biyayin. Okay, so this is an interesting one. This is going to be this pasuk is almost incomprehensible, but Tarti belibi limshoch beyayin es besori. Right. I enticed myself, all right here. They say I ventured to stimulate my body with wine, right? He's now going to go after wine. He's examined wisdom so far and examined folly, and now he's going to turn to alcohol. He's going to turn to an altered state of mind. V'libi noheg b'chachma, and my heart led with wisdom, v'le'echos b'sichlus, in order to grab on to folly, Ad asher era eze tov livnei ha'adam, asher ya'asa tachas hashamayim, mispar yemei chayehem. Right. With wisdom, I grasped onto folly in order to examine what is the best way for a person to act under the sun for the limited days of their life. So I had a thought about this. I'm not sure. I mean, what do you guys make of this this idea that he's turning to wine and then grabbing onto folly? Any reactions to this? So I have a question about this. Not to tell too many tales of my wild youth, but I know that for me, some of the fun when I was younger, in college, maybe drink at a party. Part of what was fun for me about that is that you drink a little bit, you get a little drunk, and then you do normal things, but the normal things are out of whack because you're drunk. And like for me, that was like half the fun of it. And I guess that's what comes to mind when he's saying his heart with wisdom grabbed onto folly. Like, is he describing being drunk? I guess that's my question. Is he describing being drunk that with some degree of intentionality, he's grabbing onto something that's kind of crazy and kind of foolish? That's my question. I'm not really sure what this verse is saying.
My central idea about Kohelet is that he is on this journey, this spiritual, intellectual journey, to discover something that stays and you can take with you.
Okay.
And I think all of this stuff that he pursues is trying to achieve that, and to achieve that not only for himself, but for other people. And so he's really like a combination of like a seeker and a dilettante, and I don't know what else the word I'd use, but so I think what unites his quest is his fundamental perception that you don't get to hold on to anything, that everything is futile, vain, fleeting, mainly fleeting. Because, vanity is a loaded word. Vanity means that you think more of yourself than is there. It doesn't mean you're worthless, but you think a vain person thinks they're gorgeous, but they're not gorgeous. They're nice looking. So I keep returning to that because I think in the back of his mind is that one thought is and it really is played out in the following verses that we're going to read in a minute. He has, quote, everything, but he has nothing because nothing sticks, nothing stays. He can't take it with you. And that seems to be his central obsession, is that when life is gone, it's really gone. And we're looking for something to, quote, hold on to, and he cannot find that.
Yeah. No, agreed. I agree that that's his basic aim as well. I will say I think this chapter, I've been thinking about it a lot. When I was looking through this chapter, it might challenge that a little bit, only in terms of we're going to see he's going to get very upset by how fleeting everything is. And some of his language makes me wonder if at least when he was pursuing these things, maybe he didn't yet realize that he seems a little too cranky for it to just be fleeting. But I agree with you that vanity is a loaded term. I prefer fleeting also. We're going to see, we're going to have to see if that holds up in this chapter. I think ultimately, yes, but not without some challenges. Did we lose Stuart? Okay. That's all right. I'll let him back in if he comes back. Okay, so we're on the fourth pasuk. Higdalti ma'asoi, right? This is interesting also. Right, I multiplied my possessions. The translation I was working with said in possessions. Art Scroll says I acted in grand style, right? That's interesting because ma'asoi, ma'ase is usually an action. So higdalti b'ma'asoi sounds like it's talking about action, but keep in mind it might also be referring to property. Thematically, for sure, that's what's going on. Higdalti ma'asoi, so either I acted grandly or I increased my wealth. Bonisi li batim, I built houses for myself. Notati li kramim, and I planted vineyards, vineyards. Asisi li ganos ufardesim, right? I made for myself I planted gardens, and I planted what's it called? Orchards. Vinotati bohem eitz kol peri. And I planted all kinds, fruits of trees of all kinds of fruits, all kinds of fruit trees. Asisi li berechos moyim, right? I dug trenches to irrigation trenches. Lehashkos mehem yar tzomeach eitzim, in order to water a grove of young trees. Konisi, okay, so I want to stop for a second before we go there. A very interesting thing, I think, here, right? The chapter started out a little bit more theoretical and a little bit more, I'm going to turn to wine and see what that does with wisdom and madness. But now I think he's exploring things that we classically assume to be productive, worthwhile pursuits, right? He's planting gardens, he's building houses, he's doing what I think most of us, at least on a figurative level, what most of us are involved in our day-to-day lives, right? He's not just like sitting around doing nothing, lamenting about the world. He's being productive, right? So these are things that I think we classically perceive as productive and worthwhile work. So he goes further. He says in Pasuk Zayin, in the 7th verse, Konisi avodim ushvachos uvnei vayis hayali, right? I bought male servants, or male slaves and female slaves, and I had like butlers in the house. Gam mikne vakar vatson, right? And I also acquired flocks of cattle, herds of cattle, and flocks of sheep, harbe, a lot. Harbe hoyali mikol shehoya lefonai b'Yerushalayim, right? I had more than anybody else in Yerushalayim. So this is both, on the one hand, it's amassing wealth. On the other hand, it's work. He's engaged in work. He's not sitting around doing nothing. Konasti li gam kesef zahav. I'll pause in a minute. I just want to sort of catch. There's sort of sections in this chapter. Konasti li gam kesef. Right. I also acquired silver, the zahav, silver and gold, uskulas malachim, and kingly malachim v'hamadinos, kingly and stately treasures. Asisi li sharim visharos, right? I also I hired, or I made singers, male and female singers, bisanugos b'nei ha'adam, and all pleasures of people, shida v'shidos, which based on the Ibn Ezra probably means concubines as well. So this is again, this is an ancient king. So that's okay. So vigodaltu behosafti mikol shehaya lefana b'Yerushalayim, right? And I increased and gathered everything in Jerusalem. Af chochmasi omadati li omdali, and even my wisdom stood for me. V'chol asher sho'alu einai. No, sorry, I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna pause before we keep going. Ultimately, he's going to tell us that all of this is fleeting and worthless. But again, he's amassing wealth, he's amassing slaves, he's amassing influence, and he's building, he's amassing property. Questions, reactions to any of the pieces in here?
Well, these are all monuments to himself. These are what
Okay.
This is what I will leave. It's like the pharaohs. I will leave this giant, legacy. This is what I have. I'm leaving this
Sure.
giant. I've done everything. I'm the biggest ever, and that's what I'm leaving. That's what I retain. That's my surplus. And then he finds, that it's not so. That doesn't do it. That even
Sure.
having this giant legacy and this enormous, quote, worldly accomplishment, somehow in his eyes, that is still fleeting and, in fact, in a certain sense, empty.
Good. An interesting thing. Mordechai. Okay, hold on. Okay, welcome, Mordechai. So an interesting thing that I noticed in these psukim, first of all, he has male and female singers, right? There's halachas about kol isha, about listening to women sing. Just an interesting little thing here. This may be, it's a big debate in the poskim and in the Gemaras, I think, whether we assume that kol isha is a Torah law or a rabbinic law. This makes it sound like it's a rabbinic law to me, but okay, that's a rabbinic aside. But good. Okay, but these are the things that we classically see, that I think the most people classically see as productive and as lasting, right? Wisdom's already a little bit esoteric, and there's plenty of people that approach it the way that Solomon has as well. But when people think about what's a productive life, it involves amassing wealth and property and being involved in it. Again, I want to emphasize that he's involved in it. He's digging the trenches, he's building the houses. I'm sure he's got servants doing it for him as well, but again, he's not just sitting back. He's taking an active role in all of these things. Okay, so now we're in the 10th verse, pasuk yud, v'chol asher shoalu einai lo otzalti mehem. Right, this is an interesting one, right? Anything that my eyes desired, I didn't deny it to them. Lo monati es libi mikol simcha. I didn't prevent my heart from any happiness. Ki libi sameach mikol amali. V'zeh hoya chelki mikol amali. So let's see how Art Scroll says it. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not deny them. I did not deprive myself of any kind of joy. Indeed, my heart drew joy from all my activities, and this was my reward for all my endeavors. So this I definitely want to talk about for a minute. I was looking at two translations basically when doing this. There's the Art Scroll that we just read, and I was looking at the JPS as well. And the JPS translates this verse as the word amali, right, which really I think means my efforts. JPS translates that as wealth. I don't like that translation as much. I think it makes sense in context, and I think that's why they went with it. But I'll tell you what I think is very interesting. If we assume that amali is my work and my my involvement with stuff, I'm wondering if we understand it that way, I'm wondering if he's already giving us a little bit of what might actually be worthwhile. Again, he's going to call this fleeting as well, but he says, right, I didn't hold back any joy, because the joy that I got was mikol amali, was from all of my efforts, right? I think we talk a lot about finding joy in the work that we do. And I think a lot of us hope for that, and I think a lot of us try to find work that will do that. And he says, amali, right? That's my portion. My portion is this joy that I've gotten from the work that I do. I don't know that that's a bad thing, and I'm not sure that he's calling it a bad thing either. In many ways, I think he's almost saying like that is the worth that you get in this world is the happiness from the stuff that you do. That's not you can't take that with you either. But this already feels a little bit less pessimistic to me or a little less nihilistic than a lot of the rest of it. And I'll add in that this is still taking pride in your work and getting joy from your work is also classically part of the productive life, classically part of what we do think is worthwhile living in this world. Okay. Let's do a few more verses. We're in Yud Aleph for 11. Vonisi ani b'chol ma'asai she'osu yodai uve'omal she'omalti la'asos, right? And I stepped back, I took a look at everything that I did, and of all the work that I was involved with, all the wealth that I accrued. V'hine hakol hevel u'ru'us ruach. And behold, I saw that this was all fleeting and a vexation of spirit, they usually say, yeah. Ru'us ruach. Ve'ein yisron tachas hashamash. And there's no real profit under the sun. This, by the way, this especially Ethan, this is, I think, a little bit of challenge to simply understanding it as fleeting, right? Vanity has a negative connotation. The fact that he says ve'ein yisron tachas hashamesh leans more towards the negative. I'm with you. I like fleeting better, and I think it works better for a lot of it. but this is a little bit of he's upset by this, right? He is sort of labeling this as a not good thing.
Yeah, I think Kitron is the key to the whole piece. Where is the thing that you keep? Where is the thing you retain? What do you
Okay.
leave with? In fact, I like your previous point, Rabbi, because the controversy, if you will, is between the Helki and the Yitron. If you have your portion in life, you're
Yeah.
fulfilled. You had whatever it is, whatever you value,
Yeah.
your work, your wife, your children, your ancestors. That's you have your Helik, you have your portion. That's the promise of Jewish life in many ways. Everyone should have their portion. That's not good enough for him. He wants the Yitron.
Okay.
He wants more than
Okay.
that. He wants the thing that you leave with, that you retain. And as I've said, but we retain nothing in a certain sense of the word. And that's what's maddening him. That's why he's on this gigantic quest that involves all this incredible activity and spread out between pleasure seeking, culture, and then just world building. These are the words
Yeah.
of a king. He's a pharaoh. He's building all these amazing things, but they don't do it, because they're not a portion. He's looking for a yitron.
Nice. So you're setting up a distinction between the Chelek, which maybe describes sort of this world, right? There's something called the good life in this world, and you can benefit from it. But then there's also something called Yisron, which is more eternal, and that's what he's after, and that's what he's not able to find. I like that. I like that.
You
Good.
know, though, in number 10, though, he
Yeah.
is saying that I have the translation that you sent
Yeah.
in the email. For my heart had joy of all my labor, and this was my portion from all my labor.
Yeah.
So he is saying that he did receive something.
Yeah.
Yet what he received, yet what is it that having joy is even about? What is even having joy uh a valid thing to have? Is that a is I guess even joy is fleeting. You can have it, you have it, and yet it doesn't stay.
Yeah. But what
So
I like about what you're saying and about that translation is that even though joy is going to be fleeting as well, there's still a subtle acknowledgement here that there's joy, that he has joy, right? I think it takes the edge off the nihilism.
so there is an attainment of something.
Yeah,
Something
yeah,
has been attained.
yeah. And if we
Yeah.
want to understand his main problem as that everything is fleeting, so that's true. Everything, from our perspective, everything is fleeting. It doesn't have to mean that it's worthless, God forbid, right? The human life is short, but it's valuable and it's full, and that I think is very Jewish. And I think we can say that I think there's room to include Solomon within that worldview, even in this very grumpy kind of work.
I think the idea that it's fleeting and simultaneously not worthless.
Yeah.
So
So I
that,
don't know if he's saying that, but I'm saying it. It sounds like you're saying it, and I think
yeah,
there's room within what he's saying to believe that.
yeah.
Cool. Okay, let me just see. This might be a good stopping point. Let me just see what the next verse is. Okay, yeah, let's go a little bit further. Ufonisi, right? We just saw 11, so we're on 12. Yud Beis. Ufonisi ani liros chachma v'olelus v'sichlus. So this is sort of the start of a new section, but it's interesting over here. This is already a little bit of a repetition from the first chapter, right? Again, he's talking about examining wisdom and examining madness and examining folly. Kimeh Adam. Now this Hebrew is very hard to make heads or tails of, but Kimeh Adam shiyavo achrei hamelech eis asher kvar asuhu. So how does Art Scroll say it? Then I turn my attention to praising wisdom with madness and folly. For what can man who comes after the king do? It has already been done. So the truth is, so I saw an interesting thing in JPS's commentary. They want to suggest that the vowelization is a little bit off, and that really it should be where What did they change? No, you know what? I don't see it in the Hebrew enough to present it for now. Maybe I'll bring it next week. But he's going to move on a little bit to sort of legacy, right? Which again, we've been talking about legacy, but now he's going to move on explicitly to legacy a little bit more. And he's saying when the king has done so many things, what's it even worth it to come after that king who's done so many things? The king did it all, so who's coming next? The JPS wants to change it to who's coming after me rather than who's coming after the king. But again, I don't see how it's done in the Hebrew yet. I'd want to look at that better. So that's where the focus is going to shift to now. He's going to start talking about who's going to come after him and what are they going to inherit from him. But I think we will see that next week. Any closing thoughts or questions?
Well, I think that the person that wants to do something that's, quote, never been done before and wants, to be, outstanding and this is part of the whole vanity thing is that
Okay.
it's like, why bother if it's been done better than me or it's been done before? And this cuts again to the whole point that, you're not good enough or it's not good enough. Having a full life in this very despairing kind of egotistical worldview is that's nothing special. Now that's been done. So if an average person can't possibly rival the king, you can build your house, but it's not a palace, and you
Okay.
can do so. And that cuts to sort of this, the essence of this personality is, why bother? Who will recognize me? What will I retain? What will I have that no one else has? And that's, of course, is a very vain kind of foolish view of life. But I
Okay.
think it's really integral to this person's quest, is this sense that they want to be exceptional and spectacular and extraordinary, but that doesn't really come our way.
Okay. Great. The Seder. Okay, with that, I want to thank you all, folks, for coming in, and let's shoot for Thursday next week. I'll send out an email, but let's shoot for Thursday. It sounds like there's enough people that can make it that we'll do that, and that'll get us the end of the second chapter, and that'll get us on to the third chapter soon, which is a time for everything. So that's good
All
stuff.
right.
But okay, thanks, folks. We'll
Thank
you.
you.
have a good
Thank
week
Thank you.
you.
and have a good Shabbos.
Okay.
Okay,
You.
Wait, good Shabbos.
Shabbos.